in addition to helping organize this conference, I've put together a panel. The great thing about the panel is I'm not even the moderator, I'm the ringmaster. Before we human beings ever wrote a single word, whether it be on paper, on parchment, on the walls of a cave, they drew pictures. And there's a never-ending number of cliches about the power of images, pictures with 1,000 words, etc., etc. And there's also a never-ending number of cliches about the power of satire and humor. And I won't even go into those. Our panel this evening is the revolution, well, being illustrated. And what we're going to do this evening is have 13 GV community members who have chosen their cartoonists from their country to introduce to you this afternoon. So this panel is about images, it's about humor, and it's about activism and revolution. I'd like to invite the first of our presenters this evening, Leila Nachwati.
Yes. Hi, now it's working. So you will be passing or I will be passing?
Yes.
So how does this work? It's the other way around, like this?
Yeah. All right. And Leila is presenting Crisis Valero from Spain.
So I have to apologize before I start because I have to leave before we finish this session. So I have to go teach my class. My students are waiting for me in Madrid. And as much as I would love to enjoy the party, this is very anti-climatic for me, but I'm going to have to leave in the middle of this session. So, I love you in advance. So, Cristina Valero, she's a Spanish cartoonist, graphic artist, and she decided to change, like she uses the nickname Crisis instead of Cristina Crisis Valero because she writes to escape her own personal sadness and her own personal crisis, especially the crisis of being a journalist in a world where it is increasingly difficult to be the journalist you want to be. So she draws what she wants to express as a journalist. Okay? If we can have people on the back or eating cake, you're welcome to eat your cake here with us. Everyone, the buzz on the background, can you please bring it here? So Crisis Valero came to my office at my in the department at my university where I teach, and to interview me about the Syrian uprising, and we talked for 2 hours, and I didn't know that she was going to turn our interview into a comic. So she did. This is just the first page of a comic, of a graphic novel that she wrote about the Syrian uprising, trying to explain the complexities of what's happening in Syria, to face the increasingly simplistic and reductionist Syria that we get through mainstream media. And she included me as the narrator of the story she was documenting. This is called Apocalypse Now, and it reflects how Crisis sees the mistakes of history repeating itself, the monsters of history repeating itself, war, violence. This is called foreign aid, and it reflects the contradiction between foreign aid and international politics. This is called El Mal del Mar. It's the sickness of the sea. and it shows the destruction, the relentless destruction of nature. Marcelina, where is Marcelina? So Marcelina is a cleaning lady that Cristina met when she was protesting against the Bologna higher education plan to establish a more private system of higher education in Europe. So Marcelina was a cleaning lady that joined the protest, the student protests, and wrote a blog post documenting what she was seeing from her job, from her work as a cleaning lady, and as a result of that, she got fired. So students did this to protest, where is Marcelina? We want Marcelina back. This is called Killers, Terrorism in Iraq. So it's the face of US invasion of Iraq, and this is actually taken from an archive of censored news at the University of Sonoma. So she takes news that she reads of an archive of censored news in the US media, and she turns it into a comic. And this is the May 15 movement, the Spanish protests. The police, our rights are your rights. So you're here to support citizens, not to repress citizens. This was one of the banners of the Spanish protests. And this, I love this one, it's called Cyberpunk, and it is some sort of reflection or criticism of the elitist view that many intellectuals have of the average contributions of average people and the working class and working people. So it reflects the elitist view of culture and reivindications that sometimes exclude average people. And the donkey is supposed to be a metaphor for or reflection of the donkey in Animal Farm and how it is put aside. This is her, and you can also find her on Twitter. If you can tweet, it's at Crisis Valero on Twitter. If you want to say hi and say you love her work and say Leila really recommends her work, I will thank you for that, and I'm sure she will too.
Thank you, Leila. And safe travels back to Spain.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Dan Kennedy.
So, this is a Russian designer, cartoonist, and satirist called Igor Shkun. Shkun's work is very popular on the Russian internet, but he has occasionally appeared in mainstream publications like Russian Newsweek and Russian Esquire. Shkun's work is highly informed by pop culture, particularly sort of American cartoons, films, and sort of, I guess, the more global Western popular culture, but he sort of takes these images and then he sort of subverts them, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of how he does that. This is a fake series from fake film posters which Shkun made, and this is called Gazprom and the Near Abroad, which is a sort of Russian term for the, slightly condescending Russian term for the former Soviet Union, and here we can say someone saying to Harry in Ukrainian, actually, Harry, why is our goblet of fire not burning anymore? And it's a sort of pun on the gas wars that took place between Ukraine and Russia a couple of years ago, when many Ukrainians were left without heating and gas due to sort of, I guess, geopolitics or energy politics. This is one called, well, it's it actually translates to third term, but it's a pun because the Russian word srok is quite similar to the, I guess, the name of the eponymous ogre from Shrek. So you get third term or third term, and underneath it says, Putin sets off to find Prince Medvedev, who can become his successor, take the throne, and allow him to return to his village in the swamp. And this was at a time when Putin had recently announced he intended to return to the presidency, which was quite poorly received in certain Russian circles. And I'm going to play a video for you now. I hope it works. We had some minor technical issues, but I think this is possibly his most famous work. It's a YouTube video called 12 Years of Vladimir Putin in 2 minutes. producer stuff. Anyway, I have a couple of screen grabs there that I'm going to show you. First of all, you might notice that like a lot of his work is very informed by popular culture. This is actually a parody of a very popular YouTube video from a few years ago called Noah Takes a Picture of Himself Every Day for 6 years. So that's sort of one way he's sort of writing back to popular internet culture. The other thing you might notice is that who does Putin remind you of? Well, if we look here, he's very, very similar to a certain character from The Simpsons, Mr. Burns. And unfortunately, we didn't get to it, but there's another scene where this is a Chechen president, Ahmed Ramzan Kadyrov, thinking of his father. He's a sort of local strongman who's very supportive of Putin, whom Putin has been very supportive. He's the president of Chechnya, and he's been accused of various human rights violations by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. And in the film, which unfortunately we didn't get to see, he's portrayed as Nelson Muntz. And there's a rather grim scene in the next one. These are the 168 victims of the Beslan school siege, which was a terrorist incident in which many accused Putin of choosing force over compromise, and unfortunately it led to the deaths of a lot of children. But I think what we get here is a sense of Shkun drawing on these sort of, I wouldn't want to say universal, but very well known and very sort of clear archetypes from popular culture. So he paints, for example, Putin as Mr. Burns to instantly bring to mind sort of this sclerotic, old, avaristic old man, and he paints him as a neighborhood bully, or Kadyrov as a neighborhood bully, to sort of instantly show you that this person is sort of cruel and mean and kind of thuggish. And I think kind of most strikingly, he has the children represented as Kenny from South Park, who is so disposable to the creators, he's literally killed every week. I think this is just an interesting example of someone who's taking sort of these sort of more universal or more Western pop cultural things and sort of simultaneously drawing on them and subverting them in a sort of very Russian way. So, thank you very much.
Next up we have Marianne Diaz from Venezuela.
Hi. Now, 2014 wasn't really a good year to be a Venezuelan cartoonist. Several were fired throughout the year. Actually, 2 of the 4 most important cartoonists in the country were fired because of cartoons that the government didn't quite enjoy. This is Eduardo Sanabria. He's one of those who actually were not fired last year. He's received several awards as the best cartoonist in the country, and he is probably the one with the widest audience within the country. Of course, amplified by the fact that his drawings still come in the newspaper every week. I'm going to show you only three of his cartoons from last year. The first one requires a bit of context, since it refers to the protest that started last February. A great deal of violence was used to suppress those demonstrations. And one of the reasons for those protests was the high rate of crime. Venezuela is currently the second country with the highest murder rate in the entire world. In this cartoon, the police ask the citizens if they are students, and they answer that they're just going to rob and kidnap. And the police answers, okay, go ahead, but no demonstrations. The second one gained a lot of attention and was reprinted in several countries after the restart of the diplomatic relationships between Cuba and the US. As you know, Cuba has been the closest ally of the Venezuelan revolution. And in this cartoon, we see Castro holding hands with Obama while he sends Maduro in the waterfall. It's of course an analogy of the current economic situation. And the one that I have chosen to show you at the end doesn't require words. It also came out during the protests in early 2014,
when the mainstream media wasn't reporting anything at all, and we resorted to social media to find out what was happening. It was the only way to break the information wall, as has been in many other places before and after that. And I also think that this illustration is another example of how powerful images can be to convey ideas, because it says, without words, that in the face of censorship, the only way out is through. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Next up, we have Gershom Ndhlovu from Zambia.
Good afternoon. Cartoons in Zambia have not been a very popular genre. There's a group of people that realized that cartoons can actually convey messages in an environment like we exist in. So what happened was this group introduced a magazine which they wanted to be publishing at least quarterly. But then after they published two issues of the magazine, the publishers returned the check to those guys and said, we cannot print your works. Why? Because the works were too politically controversial. This cartoon comes from a strike that took place at a mine in the rural areas of Zambia. The mine was run by the Chinese, and the workers were not being paid very well. In the process, one Chinese manager was killed by striking workers. So this guy came up with this cartoon. This is good sound. Oh, we don't. This is a depiction of news, the alternative news as it should be presented. But what happened was, this guy started a series of cartoons, in TV form. But then, as we are saying, it's one genre that brought a lot of controversy, and in the process they abandoned it. This is a cartoon of our late president. As you may know, Zambia lost a president some 3 months ago, and we just had elections anyway, and the new president was inaugurated today. So this cartoon portrays the former president. It talks about the promises that he made before the elections. And when he got into office, all these promises that he made could not be met. So as a result, this cartoonist portrayed him in a Pinocchio kind of image. I promised you 50+1. People have been calling for a 50+1 kind of election where the president should be elected by 50% plus one vote. But at the moment, the election is first past the post. Then there was a promise to end corruption. What happened was, when this president went into office, corruption just skyrocketed. Freedom of assembly, when he was in office, no political party ever conducted a rally. And then there were the issues of women's rights, a promise to give people a new constitution, which all never took place. If you remember, I did a story about him talking about an animal constitution. Have you ever seen an animal constitution? Because the people were demanding a people-driven constitution. And he reacted by saying, there's no animal constitution anywhere in the world. So this is the cover of one of the issues of the magazine that they did. And And that's their website. So if you want to check out some of their works that have been curated, can be found on that site.
Thank you, Gershom. And our next presenter is actually presenting his own work, Kevin Rothrock from Global Voices.
So there are a lot of very talented artists here, daring satirists, and then there's this jerk, me, Kevin Rothrock. And I think the purpose of including me in this company is that the message anyway is that you too can join this movement of political satire using images. And I certainly have jumped into the foray, and using simple tools that are available. There are web-based tools, there are applications you can use. I held a workshop during our internal meeting explaining some of the basic ways you can produce these mashups. I have no formal training, it's just sort of the ideas that pop into my head when monitoring news and writing stories. And so I assume a lot of you are in the same position. And so if you just think it through, you might be able to do some of this yourself. And so I try to break down the photo mashups that I produce into a few basic themes so you can start thinking in the same terms. Because I think the most important thing is to start categorizing your ideas. And once you've done that, it'll be a lot easier to decide exactly what kind of satire it is you might want to do. So playing with logos is one of the easiest things to do. And a lot of us that do work with Advocacy, this sort of thing, this might come naturally. So here you've got Vladimir Putin popping out of an egg painted with the Wikipedia logo. You've got Wikipedia bombs dropping from a plane. It's the weaponization of the internet. And we read a lot about this sort of weaponization of information and so on, the manipulation of information. This is one thing you could do with that concept. Twitter, let's play with logos, let's paint them up, right? This is playing with the familiar see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. You can cut off their beat, you can put little headphones on them. This sort of thing is easy to do. You could put the Twitter bird in front of the Tiananmen Square tanks. You can play with the theme of time, countdown, and put a clock around a Twitter logo. This is another thing I've been doing. One way, if you're trying to reach small media outlets, so for instance, if you play with the Twitter bird logo or Google or YouTube or whatever, nobody working at that company is likely to reach out to you and say, thanks very much, or, screw you. But if you play with small media, new media, and a lot of us are working with activist communities, NGOs, and so on, you can flatter them with attention. And it's a great way to build relationships. So this is a small Russian website called tjournal.ru. And this is their chief editor, and I've got their logo in the image, and this is a great way to catch their attention. And so I'm now buddies with this fellow. Again, you can take what is essentially stock images, put their logos in front of them, and you can create political satire out of what was essentially something that was kind of boring to begin with. More playing with logos. This is the logo of a Russian independent television station that's come under fire for political reasons in Russia. And so this is the first of 3 images where I'm playing with the political pressure that they're now experiencing. Tor is an easy one because it's anything with food. You can play with knives, teeth. That's simple. So if you're writing anything that involves a food-like logo, go to town. It's easy. I was pointing out to people when I was giving them lessons that one of the simple ways to give your images depth is to have something coming out on top of the logo. Again, this is kind of inside baseball, I suppose, but this is helpful if you're trying to produce compelling images. Playing with popular culture, I'm an American, I think in terms of bad Hollywood films, and I'd like to think that a lot of people around the world are similarly inflicted with this terrible, terrible disease. And so, RoboCop in Red Square getting out of a Russian traffic cop car. It's hilarious, and it's a story about cyber nanny and cleaning the internet and so on. The Matrix. This is what I think of when I think of 2 choices. It's the red pill or the blue pill. But when both options are bad, why not have it be Putin who's Morpheus? And instead of red pills, it's just 2 hands full of something that's not so nice. It's funny, right? This is the sort of thing that pops into my head. I mean, everybody has these cultural references, and it doesn't have to be Hollywood, it doesn't have to be universal, it can be more local, but you can really appeal to your audience by playing with this sort of thing. Die Hard, the guy in the photo here is the creator of what is essentially the Russian Facebook, a website called Vkontakte. and he was coming under fire. There's a lot of these stories about Russian media involve people coming under fire, coming under pressure, just as so many of the stories on GB do. This is a little bit of a dated one, I guess. Dr. Strangelove, Putin riding the nuclear missile down. SpongeBob, maybe this is the opposite, this is more modern, but again, you can play with themes. So these don't involve necessarily logos or Hollywood, but if you're thinking in terms of a story about Kremlin instructions being revealed, well, you can think to yourself, maybe somebody's pulling the curtain from behind a secret and revealing something. If you're talking about color revolutions, why not do something fun with color? Protest, you can throw hands up in front of a monument. This story happens to be about a protest that hadn't taken place yet. It ultimately did not take place, but I don't have an image for a protest that hasn't taken place yet, so how do I demonstrate that visually for my readers? I'm going to make it up. I'm going to use fists in front of a background. This is one of the primary oppositions in Russia. There was a story about whether maybe he was receiving, backdoor funding from the Kremlin. Well, I'll put him in a soup kitchen. I'll put Putin on the wall. Terminator eyes are always a win. Playing with memes is one of my favorite things to do. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sad Keanu. Keanu Reeves sitting on a bench. It's a meme for some reason. I don't know why it's funny. But let's put it next to Ronald McDonald with a story about McDonald's struggles in Russia. Putin reaction faces. I think they should be more popular than they are. I'm trying to promote them. This is a story about a rather unwholesome event that took place on a day otherwise dedicated to children in Russia. The woman whose face is popping up is a conservative Russian politician. This is a sort of disapproving facial reaction meme. And then there's the just going nuts variant of what I do. This is both a combination of when I have a really specific idea of something and when I have really no idea, I'm just going to start kind of piling things on. I think because it's the internet, it's okay to embrace the chaos on occasionally. And for people just starting out producing their own photo mashups, this might be a good place to begin. This is a story about a particular Russian philosopher who has this concept of the good Putin and the bad Putin, the solar Putin and the lunar Putin. So let's have Putin shirtless on a horse, wearing an astronaut helmet on the moon. This is a story about, I won't get into the details, but it has to do with NATO, Ukraine, Russia. Let's just have an all-out battle of absurdity. And this is a good demonstration, I think, of my creative process. Just of sleep, and there's all kinds of nonsense popping up around me. Sometimes you can take, I think there was another one that was essentially sort of a stock image, but you can add in something to personalize it to make it more relevant to the story that you're working on. Putin as a back tattoo, isn't that a kind of traumatizing idea? Or Putin as a woman, as a little girl. This sort of thing is easy too. This might be another good place to start, in fact, is photoshopping any prominent politician or activist onto the body of a child or the opposite sex. It's easy laughs. Again, Beyonce. So if I could just say one more thing, the sort of biggest advantage to doing this sort of work, and I'm really addressing the fellow GVers here now, is it's a great way to bring in readers that wouldn't otherwise see your work. If you tweet a link with the headline and the URL to your story, if you can attach an image that somehow plays on the headline or plays on the content of your story, it will get you more readers. And so this sort of thing is really, really advantageous for people to start doing and trying on their own. Thank you.
Next up from the Philippines, we have Carlo Mongaya.
Hello, good afternoon. I'll be talking about Pixel Offensive. It's a digital art collective based here in the Philippines, and they create political memes on Facebook. They share it on Facebook. Did anyone... oops, what happened? Oops. What's this? Huh?
Do you want you to the rescue? Don't worry.
Is it okay? Okay, I'll just continue. Did anybody recall seeing this image? Yes. That's on Pirate Bay. Pixel Offensive created this meme, and it was posted on the Pirate Bay homepage. This was in the height of the struggle, the campaign by Filipinos against the anti-cybercrime law, which many saw as repressive, and it curtails internet rights and privacy online. So this was one of the many highlights of Pixel Offensive. It is actually founded in 2012. It started out just for fun. It was a solo project of a graphic artist. It's anonymous. But then it's a solo project, and then later on it became a collective project with many more artists joining. The name is Pixel Offensive because pixel, as we all know, it's the basic unit of programmable data or color on computer display. And it's offensive because they think it's offensive against those in power. It's also a sort of offensive in propaganda war against those who are in power. So this is one sample, another sample of their work. So usually they use yellow and black in their memes, but then later on it evolved. This is one of their memes. If you would notice here, they say that the context here was during the time when the government was trying to demolish many squatters in Metro Manila. And they were trying to get people to be angry at squatters because they were entitled, they were said to be arrogant. But then Pixel Offensive said that no, it's not just really the squatters who are that. It's those who are in power, who are really stubborn and arrogant, and they claim the land that are not really their own. So if you would notice, Pixel Offensive was a sort of left-leaning stance, and they are consistently standing for the poor, for the workers, for the farmers, and against exploitation and oppression here in the country. So that's President Aquino, one of the memes that they did. How much land should your administration distribute? Because Noynoy Aquino is a scion of a landed family, the Cuancos, and they own a very big land estate in Central Luzon. It's the Hacienda Luisita, and one of his campaign promises back during election, and he was very popular, they say because of that, is that he would distribute the Hacienda Luisita to the farmers. But then, until now, there's already a Supreme Court decision to distribute the land. But until now, they're not yet giving this land to the farmers. So this is one of the issues Pixel Offensive highlighted. This one is related to the pork barrel issue. Pork barrel issue is a very hot issue in the Philippines because the government, they keep pork barrel. These are lump sums which only the government or the official has discretion on how to spend it. And there was a very big campaign against this pork barrel, but then the Aquino administration, they simply say that they abolish it, but then it's still there. It's still in the 2015 budget, they just changed its name. So if you notice, Pixel Offensive loves to use the color yellow and black. It's because yellow is the official color of Noynoy Aquino, of his political party, the Liberal Party. So it's a pun on the ruling party. And at the same time, according to Pixel Offensive, using this color, it's a kind of a contrast, so it never fails to catch the attention especially when you're scrolling down your Facebook feed. And this one is more recent. This one was during Typhoon Ruby, which hit the country late last year, and those are the shelters that the government constructed for the Yolanda victims, the Heian victims, and then the Malacanang has always been saying that these are very strong structures, but then a year later when another typhoon came, and this was easily destroyed. So there, it's a slow clap. Pixel Offensive is, they have around 33,000 likes on their Facebook page. They admit that they're not yet as big as they want to, unlike other meme pages here in the Philippines, which have like hundreds of thousands of likes. But then, as you could see from their work, they're not really just after the likes, but more also about the consistency of the message. So they like really to stick the finger to those in power. So that's what they're doing. Thank you.
Next up, we have Maryviles featuring an artist from the USA.
So Lalo Alcaraz created one of the most iconic images of Geronimo, the Apache chief, and he's holding her rifle and staring at you and asking, "Show me your papers." This is only one of many, thousands of images that Lalo Alcaraz has created around topics like anti-immigrant hostility, racism, and conservatism, not only in the US, but abroad. Lalo Alcaraz is a first generation of Mexican American. He born in San Diego, and he grew up in a very tough neighborhood. He often said that he felt the peer pressure to join pandillas, gangs, but he was more scared of his mom than the pandillas, so that's the reason that he never joined one of those. And he's been chronicling the Latino uprising in US, not only political, economical, and social. And his cartoons are transcend the stereotypes. And his latest project is show a la Family Guy called Border Town, and you can find it in Fox. So this is Lalo Alcaraz.
Next up, we have Mazyar Mahdavifar, profiling an artist from Iran.
Hello everyone. I want to talk about Mononyoustani, an award winner cartoonist that was born in 1973 in Tehran, capital city of Iran. He started his career by drawing cartoons for Iranian newspaper and magazines in 19th, and in 2006 drawing a cartoon for an Iranian newspaper, government-based newspaper, ended up landing him in prison for 3 months, and after that he decided to leave his country. In seeking a better and safer life, Mona, as his wife, took a long journey and frustrating journey to Dubai, Turkey, Istanbul, and Malaysia, China, and at last they landed up in Paris, France, where they currently live there. This book, An Iranian Metamorphosis, is about this journey. He explains his journey from Iranian prison system and through this journey to asylum. In 2009, there was a suspicious presidential election in Iran, and at that time, Mana was living out of Iran in Malaysia. Unlike his colleagues in Iran, he had a relative freedom of speech at that time, and did a great job by drawing hundreds of cartoons in support of democracy and the people that were on the streets seeking democracy. I think this great job made him very popular in Iranian society, especially in online media and social networks. In 2010, he received Cartoonist Rights Network International Award for Courage in Cartoonist, and in 2012 he was one of 4 Iranian recipients of Cartooning for Peace award. Most of Mononyoustani's works, especially the works that we are doing out of Iran in these recent years, are about freedom of speech and human rights and internet activism and opposing dictatorship. As you see, all of these topics are international issues, and maybe that's why he has many international fans. This is one of his recent works that is about Charlie Hebdo's tragedy. It's very interesting that he usually has a fast reaction to any important news, international or locally. In case of inspiration, he has been inspired by Brad Holland, American artist, and Argentinian comic artist, Kino. However, he believed that his elder brother, Oiwan Lam, was the most important source of inspiration for him. When it comes to form, as you see, he usually uses dense cross-hatched style, black and white colors, and no dialects. He believes that cartoons are not just a new source of news or visualized news, they show us a new perspective to the world. Maybe that's why he usually don't use bubble quotes or more dialogues in his works. And I'm gonna finish my presentation with one of his quotes. He says, "My work is to show the witness the empty part of a glass of water, but in hope of having a full glass of water."
Thank you, Mazyar. And next up we have Aparna Ray, profiling two artists from India.
Hi, so I cheated a bit. I come from a large country, so I thought I should get scope to present too. So these are two of my favorite cartoonists, Satish and Karinika Mishra. And when we think of cartooning in India, this is what we generally think. So perhaps in the cartoon form, we tend to seek laughs as per norm. But believe me, the style is pretty versatile. Can be gentle, or can stir up a storm. And let's see how the two cartoonists we present today, they have different styles. So the first one is Satish. Satish comes from a small town in India. He's a professional cartoonist. He's worked in advertising, he has a finance background, and his cartoons appear both offline as well as on online magazines. And in 2014, Forbes India has named him as one of the 24 minds that matter, and which is now presenting a very rapidly changing India to the world and the world to India. So let's look at some of his cartoons. So first, his inspiration, before I get to his cartoons. So his main inspiration is a legendary cartoonist from India, that's R.K. Lakshman. And in 1951, Mr. Lakshman had created this guy called the common man who always looks perplexed, and he's a very silent observer to India's changing history from 1951 till today. Currently he's in hospital, he's in 94, I wish him well. And there's a lot of wit, satire, but it never got caustic. And just, this is where Satish takes his inspiration from. These are some of the cartoons. So you see on the left-hand side a totally barren land, and we have politicians who always visit disaster-struck areas and offer relief. And it says, "Sir, this is neither flooded nor droughted, but we are only hit by bad government." So this is the kind of cartoons that Satish took his inspiration from, and this is what his work is. So this is a cartoon from 2009 when Barack Obama decided to tour India to celebrate Diwali. Diwali is a festival of lights where we actually burst a lot of extremely loud crackers, and that is Obama's security detail. And this is exactly what we are going to see tomorrow, because he's our chief guest at the Republic Day. with intense security. So, and this one is from 2011. This is the Chief Minister of the state from where I come, West Bengal. She came to power by defeating the long-running communist government, and she just hates anything red, which is why she turned a part of our city blue. And she does not sort of accept any kind of criticism, and promptly they are branded as Maoists. So this is a cartoon that Satish did to show the ridiculousness of that situation. And this is again from, I think, 2011, when this is one of our top politicians, Mr. Sharad Pawar. And according to our democratic process, basically, politicians have to declare their entire assets. And Mr. Pawar is actually one of our wealthiest politicians. And in 2011, he declared just 12 crores, so which is about 1.9 million USD, which I think is like a drop in the ocean as far as his total assets are concerned. And this actually got Satish into a bit of a spot with his followers, but he just went ahead with it. And then we move to some global cartoons that Satish works on. This is what he did when Malala's shooting happened. This is the Peshawar school attack. And this finally is obviously the very recent Charlie Hebdo, which was picked up by a lot of the international media and was labeled as one of the top 12 cartoons on the incident. Moving on to Karnika, India has very few female cartoonists, and she is the exception. She started by saying that, you know, you have the common man, you have a political party called Aam Aadmi, which means common man. She says, why not Aam Ladki, or a common girl? And her cartoons basically give the female perspective, and she's very activist-minded, and for all the situations, she generally deals with a lot of gender-based issues. This is what really brought her to limelight. Was in 2013, we had a self-styled godman who there was a complaint from one of the daughters, a 13-year-old daughter of his devotees, that he had sexually molested her, and that finally got the cops after him. And this is the first cartoon that Karnika drew for this. She started a comic strip called Karnika Kahe, or as Karnika says. And I think some of us know that she has been also covered in our Rising Voices website. You can find an article about her. And this government was also responsible. In 2012, we had a horrendous, I think many of you may have read, of the gang rape case in Delhi, which sort of put the gender politics on boil in India. And this man was responsible for saying that the victim could have called the guy's brother and could have, you know, chanted some religious chants to protect herself. So here she is very active, and she says, why don't you call the cop your brother now? And she's always an active voice. Now this cartoon, she did a series on this, which got her into a lot of trouble. She was threatened. She couldn't come out of her house for a long time, but she just didn't give up. And in fact, this series, for this series, she was the co-recipient of an award given by the US-based Cartoon Rights Network, and she received it along with the Palestinian cartoonist Majda Shaheen, who had also received threats for doing cartoons on the Hamas. Karnika also, as I already mentioned, that she does a lot of cartoons on gender issues, and this is basically what we call the Khap Panchayats, which is a very caste, community-based kind of social administration that northern part of India has in its rural villages, and they sort of just banned women from using cell phones, no going out of the house, no wearing jeans, etc. And this is what Karnika says, but do I have permission to do something else? I'll just uproot your mustaches. I mean, that's quite an aggressive thing to say. And this again, I think Karnika has something really, she gets, the self-styled godmen really get her goat. So we had another self-styled godman who was a government clerk, by the way, who became an extremely wealthy godman, and he was wanted on a murder charge. And this is the chief minister of the state from where he hails from, and he had spent his time rather, talking about how women should dress and dress decently. What is this nonsense about total freedom? If you want total freedom, should you go naked and all that kind of stuff. So then in this one, she says, start thinking less about dresses of girls and more about goons like Rampal. And to this day, she sort of continues doing many, many more activist kind of posts. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. And folks at the back, we're hearing you. We're hearing actually every single word of your conversation. So please keep it down. Next up, we have Indra Cornelio, profiling artists from Mexico.
Hi, my name is Indra. I'm from Mexico, and I will talk to you a little about a project called Illustrators with Ayotzinapa, Ilustradores con Ayotzinapa. I will start just by saying a few words about Valeria Gallo, which is the Mexican illustrator who started this project. Valeria Gallo is a young woman illustrator. She does a lot of work in children books. So besides doing that, one of her favorite things to do, she said, is to see. So if you would like to summarize her entire work in one phrase, you could say, she thinks there is beauty where we just don't see it. Valeria, when all the Ayotzinapa protests began, she just wasn't able to participate in the first protest, so she was feeling frustrated and she wanted to do something. So she started staring at Benjamin's eyes, and she says that Benjamin Asensio has a strong and secure look, a bit sad, but determined. So that is how this project, Illustrators with Ayotzinapa, began. The main idea of this project was to try and emphasize not just in the number, not just in a 43 number, but in the faces and the lives and the lifestyle and the things that these students used to do. So the open call for the project was, it became a really popular and well-known project, and it collected over 417 contributions. So one of the things that are relevant, I think, about this project are that it proved that there are so many other ways of protest, but also it helped out draw media attention and to get attention also and influence some other communities that don't always participate in this protest. All the images that were, these are examples of images that some other illustrators from all over Mexico and all over the world shared. And one of the other things that these illustrations were used to make a Twitter countdown of each and one of the missing students. Well, I would like, all the illustrations, you can find it in that site, and I would just like to finish this presentation by asking you to go to the site and just see and try to find all these amazing feelings that these 400 illustrators, different illustrators from all over Mexico and all over the world, try to get in each of those illustrations. So please visit the site and join Global Action for Ayotzinapa. Thank you.
Thank you, Indra. Next up we have, sorry, send it back. My mistake, I thought we had Taisa. Next up we have Tanya Lokat, profiling an artist from Ukraine.
the protests which started in Ukraine in 2013, the Euromaidan, there were quite a few artists who were covering what was happening and who were posting their art online. I'm going to tell you about one of those artists. His name is Yuri, and he's a Ukrainian musician who plays in a rock band. He's also an artist and cartoonist, and his work wasn't very prominent until the protests started, and then he was mostly drawing like caricatures and like funny portraits of people. And then he started covering the protests, and people found out that, oh, this guy is actually a really good artist. So he continues drawing and posting stuff online even now, as the protests have kind of transformed into what is now a conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So this is the guy right here, sort of sitting surrounded by his work. And his images that depict his impressions from the protests first appeared online. He had a Facebook page and he started posting stuff. And they quickly captured the popular imagination, and people started sharing his drawings on social networks and then printing them out. So he says he didn't expect his art to go viral. He didn't think it was anything special. It was just expressing himself. But some of his images have become symbols of sorts for the protesters and have captured the spirit of the time. So I'm just going to show you some of the images. This is a student on the barricades doing his homework. And this is the riot police, and behind the riot police, Putin and Yanukovych, who was the deposed Ukrainian president, and a guy from the Russian Orthodox Church. They're all hiding behind the riot police. And this is an image which went very, very viral. This is what the people who protested called the Heavenly Hundred, and this is kind of a collective image of all the protesters who died defending the ideas of Euromaidan, and we call them the Heavenly Hundred because, you know, they're all up there somewhere. I messed it up, I'm sorry. So usually his cartoons are shared on Facebook and Twitter, but during the protest, because a lot of people were on the streets and camping out in the square, you could see his art also being used to decorate the physical spaces. So this is a picture of some of his art strung up in the protest camp in the center of Kiev. And this is a billboard in Kiev, which somebody decided to decorate with a blown-up image of what he calls Putin, the Russian president, and his toys. So those are the kinds of toys that he has. And with his art, he continues to react to the tension and the events that create outrage or indignance in Ukrainian society. And so he's also been reacting to some of the recent conflict events that have taken place, such as a missile attack on a civilian bus in eastern Ukraine, and also events outside Ukraine, such as the tragedy of the Armenian family killed by a Russian soldier in Armenia in the town of Gyumri. And you know, these stories themselves kind of went viral on Ukrainian and Russian social networks. So you know, the hashtag Je suis Charlie kind of found a mirror in the hashtags Je suis Volnovakha, which is the name of the Ukrainian town where the bus was attacked, and also Je suis Gyumri, which is the Armenian town. So this is Yuri's reaction to the attack on the civilian bus in Ukraine. And this is his depiction of the Armenian tragedy. So his art is really just kind of a very sensitive and very sometimes sharp reaction to the things that happen, the things that become breaking news, but also I think is a very good mirror just of how many Ukrainians feel about what's going on. And so I think he's one of the sort of better artists of the protest movement and what has happened after the protest movement, and his images should probably have more recognition than they do. So this is just a taste of some of the Ukrainian art. Thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. And now we have Taisa Sganzerla, profiling an artist from Brazil. Hello.
Marcelo de Salete is a Brazilian artist from São Paulo. And he's an illustrator, comic strip author, and also an art teacher, like fine arts teacher and researcher. And that's him. Yeah, his work is not satire, like unlike the other cartoonists presented today. So he does more like stories. So he's more like a graphic novelist than a cartoonist, I guess. And he's been published in independent magazines, online and print, in Brazil and internationally too. But I think in Brazil he's best known for his books, and that's one of them. It's called Encruzilhada, which means crossroads in Portuguese. And yeah, well, in those books, I mean, so his comic strips, he portrays the daily lives of Black Brazilians, especially youngsters. That's a population that historically has been very underrepresented or badly represented in popular culture. So that's what he has to say about that. And just to give you some context on that, for those who don't know a lot of Brazilian history, about 4 million slaves were shipped from mainly Western Africa to Brazil between the 17th and 19th centuries, and that's about 4 times as much that was shipped to the United States, just to compare. And today, Black people comprise 51% of the population in Brazil, which is 180 million people. But they count for 63% of Brazil's poor population and 70% of those who live below the poverty line. So that's about the main numbers of racial inequality in Brazil. In his first 2 books, and Encruzilhada one of them, he explores the urban, gritty reality of a third world metropolis like São Paulo. And what I find striking about those drawings is the contrast between that brutal reality and this lyrical, poetic, black and white quality of his drawings, I guess. Yeah, in his third book, which is called Kumbe, it's a Bantu word for celebration or party, he completely changed that setting. So he made full stories set in colonial Brazil, and the protagonists are black slaves, and the stories tell their struggle for freedom. In 2013, Salete gave an interview to Global Voices to one of our authors, who's called Luis Henrique, and he unfortunately wasn't able to join us in the summit. But in this interview, Salete said that while in his two first books, he drew his inspiration from news pieces and stories he heard in São Paulo or his own life, because he's a Black Brazilian that grew up in São Paulo. To produce this book, he had to undergo deep research about colonial times in Brazil. So he researched court and police records of issues colonizers had with slaves, like slaves that ran away and stuff like this. And then he completely inverted the stories, making the slaves the heroes and the colonizers the villains. So, this completely challenges the belief that we have in Brazil that during the slavery period, the slaves offered little or no resistance to this violent system that they were subjected to. So he totally reimagines that. I think his work is a kind of work of really reimagination of history from the colonial times to current times. Because black citizens were always regarded as second-class citizens, not with the main role in Brazilian social dynamics. So he just brings these people front and center through their own stories and make the heroes of their own stories, I guess. That's it.
Thank you, Taisa. Right, and 13, lucky 13. 13th presenter is Oiwan Lam. And Oiwan's presentation is on Prezi, so I'm going to have to go out of here. Pull that up. There you go.
Since I'm the last one, I will make you guys hate me by presenting 3 artists. Okay. The term umbrella revolution appeared firstly in Western media to describe the series of massive sit-in protests demanding genuine universal suffrage in Hong Kong. But the local people call the protest Occupy Central. The occupation not only happened in protest sites, but all around Hong Kong in terms of wearing accessory, graffiti, sticker, and banner. Sorry. I hit the wrong key. Yeah. Okay. So Casey Wong, a design teacher in a local university, he managed to collect more than 100 designs of umbrella sticker. Each delivers the artist's idea about the umbrella revolution. So here, under the umbrella, we have many peoples. It's actually the Chinese character of umbrella with the word people inside. And peoples are holding hands under the umbrella. The white stars represent China, and the umbrella form a shell to bounce back the star. And the movement is about bringing changes. The movement is also about diversity against the red culture from China. Here. The previous one is about diversity, and then this one is against the If you want to see more, you can visit Casey Wong's Facebook page. Apart from the sticker, we also have artists recording what they witness in forms of sketching and painting. So Colin Young is a freelance illustrator. His representation of Hong Kong is not a kind of financial and shopping center, but a grassroots culture. So this is a public housing estate, which represents a grassroots community in Hong Kong, Free Hong Kong. And this banner was hung in the Lion Rock Hill many times during the Umbrella Revolution. Even now, the mountain era, they keep hanging the banner on top of the mountain. And the mountain, the hill, is a symbol of immigration history in Hong Kong when huge number of migrants escaped from mainland China to Hong Kong after the Communist Chinese Party won the Civil War in 1949. And this is the camping site in one of the occupation area in Advocacy. And during the occupation, students were preparing for the exam inside the occupation sites. So you can also visit Colin's Facebook. The third artist is Maxwell. He's a commercial designer, and he explained the local context through a series of comic figures, Mr. and Little Miss Hong Kong People. So Mr. and little Miss Hong Kong people are holding hands under the umbrella, sharing the umbrella. And this figure represents the 18 years old leader of the, one of the leader of the movement, Zhouhua Wong. He actually founded the student activist group when he was 14 years old. So he's a kind of fighter in the representation. And Virginia Yip is a pro-Beijing lawmaker. He supported the police crackdown, so he was drawn in this way. And this figure tells the story about self-censorship of a major TV station in Hong Kong. The wolf, of course, is our chief executive. It is unfortunately that Maxwell's Facebook account and page has been removed by Facebook for some reason. But yeah, I don't know the reason. Anyway, the umbrella revolution will continue, and the artistic expression of people's aspiration for democracy will aim at occupying people's mind. Okay.
Thank you, Oiwan, and thank you to our 13 presenters. May we have a round of applause for all of them, please. The revolution will be illustrated. Mom Palatino, where are you?
So we're wrapping up here. Thank you guys so much for being such a great audience. Just, again, thanks to my fellow MC, Mon. He's a lot more famous than I am. But yeah, my name is Lisa again, and I work at a social enterprise here in Cebu. So even though I haven't been in Cebu very long, only a year and a half, I love it, and I know that the Cebuanos have really appreciated having all of you guys here. And one of my Cebuano friends wanted me to just share about something